This is the second movie of building an advanced particle emitter for an oily kind of black smoke using a photographic or a pixel-based texture. We've created our initial layer, we have applied a colorization layer and masked it to the pixel-based layer. We've animated the color, and now what we need to do is actually go ahead and see how it's starting to look before we duplicate this to make sure we like what's going on so we don't have to work on multiple layers to get the effect we want. Up at the smoke layer right here, I'm going to double click on that. We get our layer options showing up, and it's kind of this stock bundle of stuff that shows up. I'm going to move the timeline indicator, and we get this motion going on where things are dropping down below that. Let's modify some of these settings so that doesn't occur. In the particles area right here, I'm going to reduce our particle count to something like 20 right now, so it's very manageable for the system to render. The more particles, the longer it takes to render, and the more special effects you apply, the longer it takes still. So as we get into this, one thing I do want to call your attention to is that particle emitters can be turned on and off. With the particle layer selected, you can right-click on it and you get the little modal item that turns up that says Turn Particles Off if they're on. And if they're off, well, then you can turn it back on. The nice thing is if you turn this off while there are particles being emitted, it doesn't mean that suddenly the entire animation loses the particles. It means they simply quit being emitted, and then the ones that are there disappear over time based on the lifetime you assign them, which is what we're going to start working with right here. So lifetime in frames, well, it needs to be at least 48, because that's how long my animation is for the particle color changes and how long I want them to exist. The other thing is I haven't changed the opacity on the layers, and I want to do that as well. So 48 frames. Source width, I'm going to leave very small right now. I can make it smaller if I want to. And I'll leave this the same. It's a little teeny square right there. Now, free floating, that is an option. If I move the particle emitter, what happens is the particles don't follow it. They simply stay where they are. And it's like, having a flamethrower or something like that. You point it around and does its own thing. So source depth, if we're working with source or layer depth, we can go ahead and turn that on here. Velocity, I'm going to actually kind of slow this down a little bit to 1. Velocity spread, I'll allow a variation between the velocity of 1, and some particles will emit at half that speed. Some will emit 1.5 times that speed. So that's the item right there. The direction is going to be going straight up. I'll let these things spread out as they get further and further from the particle. If I turn this down to 1 or 0, there would be a very narrow beam of this stuff, and that wouldn't look too natural here. The other thing is I want a little acceleration to the side and upwards just a little bit, not down, but I don't want a whole lot of acceleration. I want this for like just a slight wind blowing in the air. So I'm going to go ahead and give this an acceleration value of 1 and click Apply. Now we'll see our rough look here update. And if I scrub the timeline, we can kind of see what's going on. Let me back out just a little bit using the mouse wheel. And I may want to move this down a little bit, but the first thing I want to do right now is to see how this is looking just from a pure render. So we'll do a preview render. It'll think about it for a second. And this may be moving too fast. Look at how much light color we have as compared to dark. So what I want to do is slow this down just a little bit. So instead of a velocity of 1, let me give this a velocity of 0.5, change my velocity spread to 0.25, leave it as such. The rate of acceleration, I like the way this is drifting. So I'll click Apply, and we see this stuff close in just a little bit, which is fine. Let me go ahead and move this and do a quick render again. There, now we're starting to see some of the black smoke. Now, here's what happens. If this color change is taking too much distance right here, well, here's how we fix that. It's really nice to do, and why we're doing it this way. I'll come into the color layer itself, and I'm going to move some of these keyframes that are allowing this to happen. Adjusting it once, and it adjusts it for all the particles. So we get our biggest color change inside of a half second here when it goes from yellow to orange to red and then to kind of that gray to black. It starts working out that way. With the item already right here, we're going to do a quick test render again. And that may be a little bit too close. I'm not seeing any red right there. So it's a little bit of tweaking going on right here. Let me pull that out just a bit. And we'll try another render. There, kind of like that. We can work with that for the time being. Okay, with that set, let's do another animation right here, and I want to do this on this layer. I'll double click the explosion.1 PNG file. Under General, I'm going to allow animated layer effects. We go to frame 1. Okay, that's got an opacity of 100, and actually at the beginning I want it to have an opacity of 0. Apply that set. Let's move to 6. Enter 100. Apply. There we go. And then back at 48 here, I want 0. Apply.